welcome to this afternoon session for Interactive Futures, titled How We Made It. So myself, Harry, and I've got Sophie, Abby and Sam with me on the session. So firstly, I'll introduce myself, Harry Cole. I've been in the industry for about 15 years or so. I kind of started on the PR communication side of things, and now I'm the editor of IND13, which is a website dedicated to indie games. So Sophie, over to you.
Hi everyone. I'm Sophie. I'm currently working at Mediatonic on Fall Guys Ultimate Knockout, which you might have heard of. I think it was quite successful this summer. Previous to that, I was still with Mediatonic on a game called Yahtzee with Buddies on the Live Ops team, which won quite a few awards. It's one of the biggest grossing mobile games at the moment. On my route into the industry was that I started an internship with Disney Research while I was at uni and got in from there, which is a bit backwards, but I'm sure we'll go into it later. But yeah, that's me.
Great. And Abby?
Hey, yeah, so I'm Abby. I'm a senior technical program manager at Unity Technologies. I've been working in games for almost 5 years now, and I've worked across mobile, console, and tabletop. I did actually start my career in the film industry, so I have ended up in games in a little bit of a squibbly squabbly way. Yeah, I think that's all you need to know about me for now. Just excited to be here.
Thank you, Abby. Sam?
Hi, I'm Sam Ivell. I'm a junior engine programmer at Ubisoft Leamington. I've been in the industry for about 21 months now. So I spent the first 10 months working as a gameplay programmer on The Division 2. And the 11 months since then, I've been working as an engine programmer on an unannounced project. And I guess sort of because everyone's touched on it, my route into games was I did a master's degree in computer science with games development from the University of Hull. And then I've been fortunate enough that this is, sort of my first job as a result of that, from that. So, yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you. So great. The first question I've got is, can you tell us a little about your role in the games industry? So I think we touched on it there, but Abby, do you want to tell us a little bit more about your remit?
Yeah. So my job title is working as a senior technical program manager, but the role that I think most people will be familiar with comparing it to is a production role in games. In short, my job is to just connect people with the time, tools, and information that they need to do their job to the best of their ability. And the fun way of describing what I do is I'm kind of like a butler for everybody. I just run around and ask what everybody's needs are and then make sure that everything's catered to. And yeah, I won't go into too much detail about the ins and outs of my job, but I work with 3 different teams who all have very different needs. And it's my job to support the teams in what their work is and when we're going to have things delivered by, and making sure that we're on track and everybody has all the information that they need. As I said, a bit of a butler role, really.
Brilliant. Sam, and yourself?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, as an engine programmer, my role at the moment is mainly working on sort of the core technology that powers the games, rather than sort of working on the games themselves. So at the moment, I'm sort of in a platform role. So I sort of live at the place where we're interfacing our what we want to do with our game with the hardware itself. Sort of writing all the platform specific code, which is not for everyone, but I love it. I wouldn't I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. But I guess I should probably mention before then, I did a bit of gameplay programming as well. So that was sort of working on the more feature specific things for games, which, yeah, again, I think you'll see that as a lot more common. Like people, nowadays people tend to want to be gameplay programmers more than engine programmers, because it's more sort of, you get to say, hey, I worked on the game, rather than, oh, I worked on this little thing in the engine which allowed us to do this, right? But yeah, it's good work all the same.
Is that a bit of an evolution of the industry? Is that a bit of more of a new role then?
So engine programming's been around for forever, really. I think engine programming, it's never really existed as a role sort of early on in games, but I think in the early days of games, where engines didn't exist, I guess obviously Abby here from Unity, when Unity didn't exist or Unreal didn't exist, everyone, every game program was an engine programmer, really, because they were writing all their own tech and tools. But yeah, I think nowadays, certainly with, again, these big third-party engines, I do maybe see, well, I don't want to say I see engine programming as a bit of a dying art, but I think it's less important now than it used to be, because you can sort of gravitate towards these other engines. But in a AAA sense, I think we will always have in-house engine programmers.
Sophie, can you tell us a little bit more about your role?
Yeah, so I'm a concept artist on Fall Guys. I'm in the content team, which means that I focus on the costumes and the Fall Guys themselves. So my job is for every new season, I design sort of the costume and the look of how the Fall Guys are going to be, basically. As you probably know by now, the themes are all themed. The themes are all themed. The seasons are all themed. There we go. Yeah, so we get to pick our theme every season between the group. Obviously, it's decided on by our art lead. But then I focus on making the Fall Guys kind of as exciting as they can be for the upcoming season.
Have you got any favorites?
I can't say yet. Oh, of mine, I can't say yet because I started fully on the team for season 4. So look forward to that. I do have a favorite. So I squeezed one in for season 3, which is the Santa costume.
Nice.
And that got a whole live action trailer, which was really exciting for me.
Yeah, awesome game. So this one for Abby. Did you always imagine you would work in gaming, and was there a game that hooked you in?
I mean, I think I touched upon it slightly when my career started in film, and actually before that it was music. So I've really jumped to get into games. But no, I've always been really passionate about gaming. I've always been a gamer. The first game I really got into was Street Fighter, which I was definitely too young for, but absolutely loved and still do love. I'm a big fan of Spyro as well. I played a lot of Spyro and Rayman when I was younger. So gaming was always a big part of my life. But I didn't really think about a career in games until I got into university and college. I went to Confetti in Nottingham, and that's where I studied music tech and then moved into doing film production. And the whole time I was studying alongside game students who were my friends, and sometimes I'd get involved with helping out on projects, doing sound, for example, or helping edit a trailer or something. And that sort of started to pique my interest. And then it was when I was doing my master's degree at Nottingham Trent University that I really became interested in a career in games, knowing that what I was doing in film in production had transferable skills in games. And that's what sort of led to me looking and finding if there was a role appropriate for me. And luckily for me, there was.
And now you described your role as butler. Is that had some transferable skills from production?
Yeah, like working in production is just as much about your technical ability as it is your people skills. And I think it's really important when working in production to have great listening skills, care about people, be passionate about making sure your team's happy, which I think anybody in any sort of project manager role can facilitate for their teams, regardless as to what the industry is. Working in games, obviously being passionate about games helped, and being familiar with some tools that were transferable from film into games helped. But I went on a massive journey of learning about how sprints work, and how to be a scrum master, and about all of the different tools and stuff that we do use in games for project management. But the foundation of being able to move from one industry to the other was just being passionate about people and making sure that people are happy.
Brilliant. And Sam, did you always imagine yourself in gaming? And again, was there a game that got you hooked?
Yeah, I guess so. Well, certainly like the game that got me hooked was probably Journey. So I guess you consider it a little bit of an older game now. I think it was 2012, but like for me, that completely like shattered my expectations of like and rules of what a video game could be, really. Like if you've not played it, you should absolutely go play it, by the way. It's like probably like an hour to an hour and a half long. But yeah, like for me, games sort of before that point were always these little things I imagine as like time wasty kind of things. Like I should probably mention I've been playing games my whole life, right? Since early primary school. But like for me, it was always that thing like, oh, I'll just play games and then I'll go do something meaningful, right? Whereas Journey for me, like Journey, when I first played that, like it really struck a chord with me. And like I said, it transformed like, oh, games can be these things that give these lasting, deep, enriching experiences. And I hope that, when we look back, I think we kind of already do. Like, we look back at great literature and great movies. I think in the future, we'll look back at great games, and things, like I said, that deliver great, powerful experiences. But I mean, having said all that, my career path was originally very different. So, going through primary school and secondary school, like I was never really exposed to the idea of video games as a career path. Like, again, I was playing them, in my spare time all the time, but, it was never something I realized I could just do and make a living from. So what actually was the catalyst for all this was, I was doing my A-levels, and my plan at that point in life was I wanted to go to university and do economics and maths. And then, so I can't remember if it was year 12 or 13, I'm at AS or A-level, but I completely flunked my economics. I think it must have been year 12, completely flunked it. And so that caused me to have a bit of rethink and was like, oh, well, I can't, that's shattered that path. And it's the best thing that ever happened, by the way. I would be miserable if I was still on that path. And it caused me to have a bit of a rethink. And my sister's boyfriend did computer science at university. So I sort of had a chat with him and was like, what is this? I've never really heard of this. And he taught me, he didn't teach me, but like he told me about programming and like what that is and making software. And then that kind of light bulb went on in my head. And I was like, oh, games are probably, made that way too, right? I could probably use that to sort of springboard into games. So yeah, then I went to university to do computer science for games development, and now I'm here. Yeah.
Their loss is our gain, I think. So I'm glad you you said it.
Thank you.
And Sophie, what got you hooked, and what was your journey like?
I had no idea about going into games for most of my schooling. Like, I started school in like 2005. I'm from Mansfield as well, which is quite near Nottingham. So my route in, I had no idea, but obviously I'd always played games. Like, I started with the Sega machine and we moved on to like an Xbox console. So they'd always been around, but it wasn't ever something I really considered myself going into as a job. It never really occurred to me that people actually make them, which sounds ridiculous really when you think about it, but it's something I'd always grown up playing, but I'd never considered it as something that you could go into as a job. And all the way through school, I'd always been sort of pretty focused on going into English Lit or creative writing at university, which I totally fell out of love with in my last year of sixth form. I'd been taking art as well the entire time, but I completely fell out of love with English in sixth form. It was so difficult in my last year, and I was just sat there one day and I was like, if I hate it this much when it gets hard, is it something that I really want to do as a job? And then kind of blew my own mind, and then kind of avoided doing all the UCAS applications. Got to the end of my sixth form years, had no idea what I was going to do because I hadn't applied for university. So I did what every kid, I think, does when they don't have anything to do, and I went into art. So I spent a year at Vision West Arts College doing a combined illustration and darkroom photography course with life drawing and like visual studies where you draw objects. And we had this course on, it was Wednesday morning, it was only like an hour or so long, but it was called Computer Arts, where they taught us how to paint digitally, which is something I'd never done before. My background was very like fine art, and I really loved it. And it was a complete coincidence that I was like, oh, this is great. So I typed computer arts into Google. And that brought up the course at Abertay, which is called BA Honours Computer Arts. And so that's what I went and did. I applied for, I think, De Montfort, Abertay, Teesside, but like a bunch of other unis I found through there. But Abertay was always like my final goal, really, because that was the first one I'd found and I really fell in love with it. And that's basically what I went on to do, and I found I really liked it. I really loved it. I specialized in concept art going on from year one, and it was just something I worked up to since. The game I think that did it for me, going back to that, was probably Elder Scrolls Oblivion. Like, this was well before I knew I wanted to work in games, but like thinking back, as one of my biggest influences, I think that really sparked something in me, because it was the first game I played. And maybe this ties into like my love of English as well, but it was the first game I played with such a breadth of story and a breadth of narrative and artwork as well, and just so much stuff in it that I was like, wow, I can really get pulled into this. This is something I really want to get sucked into.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think narrative is so important, isn't it, to video games, and maybe it doesn't get the credit it deserves, which Sam touched on as well. So over to Abby, and your transition was almost from the film industry, but was there one big break that got you into gaming, and how did that come about?
I guess it'd be my first job in games, right? So my first job in games was working as a junior community assistant at Lockwood Publishing. And I started that job the last day of my master's. So it was like quite a daunting time finishing my master's degree, starting a new job in a whole new industry. I was really lucky. One of my friends worked at the studio already, so I had somebody to kind of look to for support whilst I was in that role. But yeah, I guess that would be it. That would be the foot in the door moment, really. I guess leading up to that, though, I was really fortunate, as I said, to have been on a course and at an institution where I was studying one thing but mingling with people from the games industry on mega games courses and stuff. And yeah, I was fortunate enough to already have like a network of people around me who were already striving for careers in games or already working in games. So I did have people that I could sort of talk to and ask for advice and ask questions of, and just kept curious. Yeah, I think that's it.
Is that something you'd recommend, building a network, to make that transition from academia into the professional space?
Yeah, I mean, having a network full stop, right? Like, regardless as to whether your network's people that work in games or not, I think it's really important to just surround yourself with people that are going to be your biggest cheerleaders. Like, whatever it is that you're wanting to do in life, whatever your mission is, I think it's really important to just surround yourself with the right kind of people who are going to support you. And if it just so happens that those people are also in the industry that you want to go into, then even better. It is a lot with all industries about who you know as well as what you know, and it is important to reach out and come to events like this, and reach out to people that you see at panels and stuff, and talk to people usually, if you reach out, the majority of the time people are happy to talk as well. I think there's a lot of nervousness around reaching out to people. A lot of people are happy to talk if you just make the first step. But yeah, it's all good. Just make sure that you've got good people in your camp that are happy to support you and be there for you when you're having a bad day or a good day, and celebrate your wins with you. And yeah, if they just so happen to be in the industry and part of your industry network, then that's a plus, but it's not essential.
But Sam, how about you? Was it a slow transition, or was it one big break that got you into the games industry?
So for me, like I've been very fortunate, so I did a master's degree at university, and this is, working at Ubisoft now is my first job. So I guess, yes, it is a big break. But, I still did take some time off after university. Like, I think with all said and done, I finished my master's degree in July 2018, it would have been. And I didn't start working at Ubisoft until May 2019. So about like 10 months off, which I think I needed as well, because I think I burnt myself out a little bit in my master's degree. I really put my heart into it. But yeah, like I think at the end of the day, like I'm very fortunate to be where I am, but I try not to let that, I try not to let the imposter syndrome set in, because I feel like that's another big issue that we all face, probably all of us here. We think, we look around and it's like, oh, it's going to happen naturally, right? In an environment with so many talented people, you're going to look around and be like, oh, they all 100% deserve to be here, and I somehow fluked through the process. But of course, if companies are offering graduate roles, then some graduates have to get those roles. And, I was just fortunate enough to be one of those people to get in straight away, which I'm very grateful for. Yeah.
And Sophie, what was your transition like? Was it big break?
I had two big breaks, I think. But like going into, this is slightly aside, but going into what everyone said, that networking is so important. It's so important, and it's something that I didn't really do much of at my university whilst I was at university, and that made it so difficult for me. Like, one of the reasons I picked Abate is because they have contacts within industries, like they do placements and courses, and they have people in to talk, and that's, again, is something I would advise looking for if you're looking to do higher education in games, because like everyone said, it's kind of partly who you know as well as what you know. But I'd kind of gone through my first 3 years, because this is in Scotland, so it was a 4-year degree, and I'd gone through my first 3 years, and I'd had, I'd had some talks, and we'd had some people in, and we'd done like a placement game design course, but I hadn't really got anywhere with it. And in my 4th year, I kind of realized that, and I sat down and I was like, okay, I graduate in a year. I want to work in this industry. I haven't really got anywhere. So I just decided to do like a yes man year and just say yes to absolutely every opportunity that came my way. And I did a bunch of stuff that went nowhere. But one of the things that did come up was a message popped up in my uni emails. Check your uni emails if you go, because this would never have happened to me if I hadn't. That there was a Disney research up in Edinburgh were looking to do a placement scheme. And so I applied, not expecting to get in. I was doing my final year dissertation on concept art for virtual reality, and the project was something called Iridium, which is interactive light field VR experience. So the narrative varies depending where you move in space. But I interviewed for that, and I just asked them a bunch of questions because I wasn't expecting to get in at all. So I was like, this is great for my dissertation. I'm going to write down a bunch of stuff. I'm going to ask you a bunch of stuff, and going to write it all down, come back, finish a dissertation. But then they asked me to art direct a student team based on that. For my final year of uni. The entire time of that, they told me they weren't hiring, and it was purely down to my own pig-headedness, because having worked with them for a year, I was like, this is where I want to work. Like, this is where I want my first placement opportunity. So I just tried my damn hardest. I was in a great position, I think, art directing the team, because it meant that I did have a lot of calls one-on-one with the team over at Disney, which a lot of other people didn't have, I think. I mean, we had group calls, but I had a lot of one-on-one ones, which really helped me. And then we got to the end of the project, heard nothing several weeks later, and then I got an email like, do you want to interview? And I was like, yes, fantastic. So yeah, I interviewed, got the role, worked there for a year. We actually took the project that we'd been working on as a student team with Disney to SIGGRAPH in LA. So they flew me out there as well, which also felt like another big break. That was totally insane. And then shortly after that, they closed down the studio. So I'd been working there for like 6-8 months, and they completely shut it down. And I had nowhere to go. Went back into retail for a year working on my portfolio, and I must have sent out, like, I'm not even joking, like 200 or so applications, and heard nothing back. So I was just working all day in retail, coming home, working on my portfolio, going to sleep, and that was my life for like 10 whole months. But I was really determined not to give up on it. And then eventually I got an email from my old boss at Disney, Maggie, who sent me the name of her recruiter, who used to work at Mediatonic. And he sent me an email like, oh, love your portfolio. I'd love to forward it to Mediatonic. And this was a studio that I'd only just found out about, because when I was looking for jobs, there's a wealth, there's a breadth of places to find them now. But like at the time, I was really struggling to find names of studios. Like I knew all the big ones, but there was no place I knew of to like look for a bunch of places to apply to. So I looked into the studio, really liked the sound of it, sent off an application, got an art test, and got the job. But because I'd been working in retail for a whole year, that felt like another massive big break for me, because I was almost expecting to like never get in again, and that would be like my one career defining moment.
Second break. I'm
yeah.
so pleased that you managed to work back in. And so, Abby, what's it like working in the industry, and was it what you expected?
I think it's a great industry to be in. I this whole like, is it what you expected? I didn't really go in with any particular expectations. So I don't think I was in a position to be like disappointed, I guess. But I think the thing that became very quickly apparent working in the industry was that there is definitely this kind of big extended family kind of attitude in studios, and not just within the studio that you work within, but within the local industry and the community as a whole. And that really did surprise me, because I hadn't really seen or felt anything like it before. you would talk to people from other studios, and you'd meet them at events like this, and everybody's just really sort of open and welcoming and chatty, and yeah, it was really lovely. It's nice that there is support and a network and a community around the industry that we're in. Not all industries have that. I think the only other thing as well that I guess was a surprise to learn was how fast paced things can be as well. Like my first job was working in mobile, and working in live ops specifically. It's very fast paced, it's very quick, and yeah, you have to kind of adapt to being able to move quick and think on your feet, which was very different to coming from film production, where you'd have a much longer length of time to plan and prep for things. Pre-production's basically non-existent once you get into live ops. But yeah, I was just yeah, excited to see this sort of network and bubble that existed around the industry. It's not just a job. Like, you don't just get a job in games, you join a community of people. I think that's quite unique.
Yeah, I think we're very lucky in that respect. It's so welcoming. Sam, how about you? Did it meet your expectations?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess like I wholeheartedly agree with Abby as well. Like maybe this is just sort of my experience working in a Leamington studio, but yeah, like it is just one nice community. And you will, even if you're not looking to network, you will network, right? You will have people who work at your studio who then leave to go to other local studios, and then you'll then have contacts there if you decide you want to move around. But as for sort of like working in the studio, like I guess yes, it is kind of how I imagined it in some ways, but no in others. Like I think at the same time, like it's incredible to, I think I'm very fortunate to be able to work on projects which I know are going to hit these wide audiences, and it doesn't feel like that. It just feels like I'm just sort of making code commits and that's kind of it. And I think because of sort of what we do, or at least maybe the phase we're at the moment, like because obviously I'm working on something unannounced, like there's nothing out in the open. It just kind of feels like you're developing a bit in a vacuum. Like I still don't really realize, or maybe this is part of the pandemic playing into it as well, but I still don't really realize I'm working on something real with, hundreds of other people or whatever. It's kind of crazy. But I guess in the ways that I don't think it's similar to how I thought it would be, quite positive as well. So I have other friends who work in software engineering sort of outside the games industry, and they've sort of come in at junior roles, and it's a lot more like micromanaged. It's kind of like, they will have a lead, and the lead will kind of draw up, rough like, UML diagrams and be like, you're the junior, I've kind of architected this thing, go build it. Whereas sort of, the work I do at the moment, it's very open. It's like, oh, we have hired you because, you know what you're doing. So, go do it kind of thing, which is a bit terrifying. But like I said, not what I expected at all. I thought it'd be a bit more structured, but I'm glad for that, right? That's a good thing in my opinion. Yeah.
Definitely. And Sophie, how about you? What's your experience been like? Given you've had some peaks and troughs. So
yeah, I don't know if this is a case for everyone or if it's just for me really, but I found that there's kind of not a big difference, but there's like a difference between the type of studio that you're in. So when I started at Disney, like obviously that's a huge company. And then when I started at Mediatonic, it wasn't, I wouldn't say by any means small, but it wasn't obviously to the same scale that working at Disney was. And whilst there is a really big sense of community, definitely in both studios, I felt like working in them was very different. Because Mediatonic was very kind of like indie when I started, and which means there's a lot more room to bounce around. There's a lot more freedom. Whereas working in like a larger studio, your role is definitely like a lot more defined. And I think that was another reason I wanted to go to Mediatonic, was because going into such a big company, this wouldn't be the same for everyone probably, but I felt so overwhelmed coming from a student to a big company. And there was so many, especially because we were like all go on the Iridium project as well. I was being thrown into like so many things that I hadn't done before. And whilst it was a big company, it was a very small team in the office, and I was hired to do a job, and it was very much like, you will know how to do this. And I felt like I was really trying hard to keep up. and I did a good job, but when I moved to Mediatonic, I was like, okay, this time I want to start at like a smaller studio, like something I can grow with. And Mediatonic's been very much like that. Obviously Fall Guys has now exploded, so the studio's had a lot of notoriety recently. But the build for me with Mediatonic as a company has been quite slow, and I've been able to sort of start when it was relatively small and build up, and sort of it's nice being in a smaller company when you can kind of like, you know, everyone's names. Like it's quite big now. We're sort of like over 300, I think, and as much as I try, I cannot name everyone in the office anymore. So I know that like it's not really like something that whether something I didn't or did expect or not, but it's just like the difference between working in a big studio and working in a smaller studio, to me feels quite different, and that might be something that you want to look into if you're looking to work in a games company, whether you want that sort of very, very close-knit studio, whether you want something that's a bit more broad.
Well, so Sam, at what point, and this is going to affect your imposter syndrome, at what point?
That's exactly what I need.
At what point did you realize you'd made it? You know, has there been a moment like that, or you know, your game's unreleased at this time? But would it be seeing something in, you know, coming into motion, that kind of thing?
Yeah. So when that moment happens, I will let you know. I guess it is a bit surreal, to be honest, to like, and again, I'm very fortunate that to be in an environment where you go into the office and, you know, to be surrounded by world-class talent. Like it's something that I almost feel guilty for kind of getting used to. But like, you know, you'll go into the office atmosphere and it really is incredible, you know, to be surrounded by so many people who are amazing at so many different disciplines. I feel like that's what's so great about games, is that, you know, there's probably other jobs out there that you kind of collect the best in the world under one roof of a certain thing, whereas games, it's like that, you know, times by 5 or 6 different things, right? You know, you have the best programmers, best artists, and it really is amazing just to walk around the office and see things. And I think, yeah, like I guess realizing you made it is like when you'll, you know, you go to the kitchen to just have a coffee, and to them you'll just be or you'll have a coffee with a colleague, and you'll realize that, you know, they've been like a lead designer on like, you know, 3 or 4 incredible games, right? And it's like, to you, you're fortunate enough just to be in that same space as them, like, whereas, you know, people outside of the studio obviously would, you know, worship them almost, and just sort of being in that environment where, you know, you can speak to the people, like speak to everyone around you, and it's everyone else is talented. I guess that makes you think that, oh, like I guess I must be talented or something too, right? Like,
yeah, that's definitely a good feeling.
yeah.
And how about you, Abby? You know, working at Unity, that's pretty special. But was there a moment where you were like, made it?
Yeah, working at Unity is amazing, and I'm very fortunate to be where I am, and I'm incredibly happy to be supporting the teams that I'm working with. I'm genuinely working with some of the nicest people I think I've ever met. But the question of like this, the concept of like making it, like, I'll be honest with you, I hate it. I really hate the question, and I hate the concept of it, because I don't think there really is a you've made it moment. You have so many wins throughout like your life. Like, forget your career for a second, forget working in games, like just your life in general. You are going to have so many like wins and moments that are worth celebrating. And there'll be so many like along the journey of getting a career in games where you'll go like, oh, I got an interview, that's a win. I got the job, that's a win. I've had my first week and I've not forgotten everybody's name, that's a win. There's so many wins that you'll experience along that journey. And I think just taking comfort in the fact that like every single day is a school day, and realizing that you will always be learning. There isn't a peak. You're never going to hit like peak knowledge of knowing everything about your role and knowing everything about the industry. Like, there are people who've been in the industry for 20 years who are still learning and still growing. And there's a lot of comfort to be taken in that, I think. I guess my advice to people would be just like acknowledge when you do have those successes and do celebrate them, but don't be put off by the fact that there's still so much more to do and learn and know, because being curious and being hungry for it is certainly what keeps me motivated, even on those days when I do sit there going like, oh my goodness, I don't know what I'm doing, and suffering imposter syndrome. The hunger to know more and learn does keep you going. But yeah, just keep celebrating all of the many little wins along the way.
I think that's, similar to what we've been saying in this conversation, isn't it? It's more of a journey, it's more of a process, and it doesn't always come down to that one unique moment where suddenly, it happens. Mm-hmm. How about you, Sophie? Is there a made it moment, or just a time where you felt, yeah, I've achieved some of my goals?
I feel like it's very much the same as Abby and Sam have said, in that like I feel so insanely grateful for my job, like every single day. Like I just anyone that's ever given me the opportunity, like my art director Phil at Mediatonic or Maggie at Disney, like I feel so insanely grateful that they gave me that opportunity. And I'm sure that they would say that they gave me the opportunity because I was the right person for the job. But I never really feel like, no matter how many wins I have, I never feel like I'm going to hit like a made it moment. Like I talk to people in the office that, I heard about on Twitter, and they come to work with us, or I see the work they're doing, and it's, it's completely amazing. And I see the work that people at other studios are doing, and I'm just like astounded every day to be like in this community. And then I just kind of am sat there like, oh my God, I'm here too. But yeah, I don't think I'm ever going to feel like I made it. Really, I'm just glad to be here.
Great. I think we can all feel some of that in what we do as well. So, Abby, what advice would you give to someone looking to work in games? And this is our final question that I've prepared before we go to the audience.
Yeah. I mean, to touch back on, every day is a school day. Keep hungry, keep curious, accept that once education is over, newsflash, it never is. Every day is a school day, every day is for learning. But also, know your worth and know your value, and really recognize the special thing that you bring to the table, the you-ness that you bring to a team and a project. Really recognize your individual value and contribution, and be, not necessarily be proud of it, but nurture it as well. Take care of those unique things about yourself that mean you are bringing something diverse to a project and a team. Don't get too sidetracked with just the processes and tools and doing and functioning. Who you are as a person is just as important. And yeah, just stay curious and stay hungry.
Brilliant. Good advice. Sophie, how about you? Advice for someone looking to work in games?
Yeah, so with events like this as well, like I don't want people to look at it as, they can, you need us, but we can help you. Like you can help us as well. Like if you're intelligent and innovative and creative, or you can bring a different perspective, like I'd be devastated if you decide not to come into games, because that's something that we really need. Like I hope that if you're considering what you want to do with your life, that you do want to do a career in games, even if you think it's hard to get into. And worry that it's not the space for you, because if you have the drive to succeed and you think you can bring something new, like that is the space for you, and we do want you. So please, apply and try your best and work really hard and value yourself and keep applying.
Great. Sam?
Yeah, I totally agree. Whatever everyone else has said. I think for me, certainly the key would be in the portfolio. I think, regardless of the discipline you're applying for, like I think that is your big chance to stand out. And it is really where, I mean, my favorite people are the ones who are always working on things in their spare time. Well, not necessarily always, but they will have something on the back burner, that they have a free moment, they'll just put some work into, because that is such a good tell of the kind of mindset that, recruiters are looking for in this industry. Like, with how rapidly the games industry changes and new processes and things come along, like we need these people who are, I think, as Abby mentioned, curious, who are always looking to better themselves and improve and really help push things forward. So it would be, like my advice would be, make your portfolio, like if your portfolio is full of good university work, that's great. Obviously good work is good work, but like try and also put some work you've done purely in your spare time in there too, as that will really help you stand out. You know, it shows that you have an actual passion and flair, and that you, most importantly, that you want to be in the games industry, right? Like above all else, you know, that you have that extra drive to be like, you know, I want to work in it so much that I do more than I have to, right? More than my course is demanding of me. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'd agree as well. I can remember a few situations where I've had interviews and we've ended up talking about what sits outside of what I thought my work was and my kind of projects that I'd done. Those were the things that got me the jobs in the end. And I've worked with Special Effect, the games industry charity, for a long time, and that's a really good, you know, if you want to get involved with an organization, they're a great one. And I've met so many people through joining, you know, Special Effect, and I'm sure there's similar ways to get more networking, more conversations going with industry folk as well.
I've really got a plus on that so hard. Like, I'm a Special Effects charity ambassador, and they're incredible. Like, you know, go look at their website, check them out. They're amazing. Yeah, they do some interesting and exciting events and stuff, which I know Mediatonic have been involved in as well. So yeah, go check them out. They're an amazing bunch of people that do incredible work.
Awesome. Right, I've got a couple of questions from the audience here, and we've got about 4 or 5 minutes left. So this one's for Sophie. It was great hearing about your experiences besides the studio closure, in brackets. I know this is something that can happen from time to time. However, when the studio closed, how abrupt / unexpected was it? And what lessons have you learned to handle that situation in the future and secure future employment? Thanks again.
I found out quite late. So I think they hired me once they knew the studio was already closing. And I think they just forgot to tell me for like the longest time. So I only found out with like a couple of months left that the studio was closing. And I think I was in complete denial because I just didn't look for other jobs. Like whilst I was still there, I was like, they'll keep us on, they'll keep the studio open. And then it closed exactly when they said it would. So if you're in that position, my advice is to apply while you're already in a job. You'll be a lot less desperate. You'll feel a lot more comfortable. But yeah, in all seriousness, I would just, if you're in that kind of position, just keep going. Try not to let it get you down. Keep applying. You'll get there eventually. If you have to go back into retail like I did, that's not the end of the world. Like, it's not the end of your career. They liked on my application when I started at Mediatonic that I was doing something else whilst I was still pursuing it. It wasn't like I dropped out and did nothing. I was doing it around my full-time job, which to them showed that I was really passionate about it, like Sam said before. So yeah, that's would be my advice on that topic.
Sam, we've got one from the audience. I'm doing vanilla comp sci-fi, but I'm interested in pivoting to games programming. Do you think that comp sci with game dev is the best way to transition, or are there other ways to gain the knowledge for specifically games programming?
Okay, yeah. So I would say that if you are thinking of transitioning to games programming and you have the option, you know, your current university has the option to switch over, I would probably recommend doing so. I mean, usually in graduate games programming jobs, there will not be a requirement that it's like, oh, it was a computer science with games course. It will usually just be a computer science course. But of course, like if it is a with games dev, you're more likely to be doing things in like, you know, graphics and engine stuff. And that's things that we kind of care about, you know, certainly at Ubisoft, you know, where we sort of make our own tech and tools, like all those kind of things are what we're looking for. Whereas like a sort of vanilla computer science thing, maybe more like C# based instead of like C++. So definitely do that. Because also saying that as well, I had quite a few friends do the computer science with games dev course with me. And unfortunately, you know, some of them who are unfortunate enough to not get into the games industry, they've easily found jobs elsewhere, right? In like, you know, commercial software, you know, so like not working in games. So like that, it's always there as a backup option. It's not like doing games dev will rule you out of like all programming jobs ever. Like programmers are in massive demand and they always will be, you know, in the world we live in. So I would say probably switch to the game dev course, because like the backup plan is, you know, you will find other programming jobs outside of games as a worst case scenario.
Right, well, I think we might have time for one more. So for Abby, I noticed you're a Women in Games, BAME in Games and Special Effect Ambassador. What shortfalls have you seen in the industry and how would you advise people in these groups to succeed in the industry?
That's a very good question. Thank you for asking it. Yeah, unfortunately, I have come across issues in the industry, and I think just the world in general, right? Let's not just make this specific to games, the world in general. There have definitely been some issues around discrimination or a lack of understanding, appreciation, and knowledge. My advice is use your network and use your voice. There have been times more earlier on in my career when I was more junior where I've come across issues around gender, for example, and I took it upon myself to use my network and use my voice to combat those issues. I think when you're in a junior position and you start out in the industry, you're quite scared of, causing a ruckus or maybe making somebody else feel uncomfortable by raising something that could be a hard conversation to have. But those hard conversations are really important to have. And if you're needing to have that conversation in the first place, there is something wrong on their end, not yours. And it's important as well because sometimes people don't know, they don't realize. I'm not saying it's on us to make sure that everybody is educated. It would be great if the world just worked better as a whole. But it's really important to have those difficult conversations. Use the network that you can build around you. There are plenty of groups like the ones listed that I'm more than happy to support and help. And back to the point that I made about knowing what is important about you and staying true to yourself and really remembering that when you go into a job. Diversity only makes for better teams and only makes for better products, and the thing that you are bringing is just as valuable as the thing anybody else is bringing. So it's worth fighting for your space if you need to, and it's worth knowing that there are people who will stand by your side if you need it. I think that's a bow on that one.
Brilliant, no, perfect. I'm glad to end on such a positive note, and I think that's all we've got time for. So thanks to Sophie, thanks to Abby, thanks to Sam, thanks to everyone for joining us today. I hope you all enjoyed the session and enjoy the rest of the event.